Hola amigos, bienvenidos a la clase número 239. Continuamos con el tema de los superlativos y este es el video número 5. Hoy continuamos con más ejemplos de superlativos con adjetivos largos. Por ejemplo, horrible, more horrible than, and the most horrible.
Fashionable. More fashionable than, the most fashionable. Less fashionable than, the least fashionable. Foolish. More foolish than, the most foolish. Less foolish than, the least foolish. Forgetful. More forgetful than, the most forgetful. Less forgetful than, the least forgetful. Frightening. More frightening than, the most frightening. Less frightening than, the least frightening. Generous. More generous than, the most generous. Less generous than, the least generous.
Handsome. More handsome than, the most handsome. Less handsome than, the least handsome. Hardworking. More hardworking than, the most hardworking. Less hardworking than, the least hardworking. Harmful. More harmful than, the most harmful. Less harmful than, the least harmful. Helpful. More helpful than, the most helpful. Less helpful than, the least helpful. Horrible. More horrible than, the most horrible. Less horrible than, the least horrible.
Immense. More immense than, the most immense. Less immense than, the least immense. Impatient. More impatient than, the most impatient. Less impatient than, the least impatient. Important. More important than, the most important. Less important than, the least important. Intelligent. More intelligent than, the most intelligent. Less intelligent than, the least intelligent. Interesting. More interesting than, the most interesting. Less interesting than, the least interesting.
Modern. More modern than, the most modern. Less modern than, the least modern. Outgoing. More outgoing than, the most outgoing. Less outgoing than, the least outgoing. Pathetic. More pathetic than, the most pathetic. Less pathetic than, the least pathetic. Patient. More patient than, the most patient. Less patient than, the least patient. Pleasant. More pleasant than, the most pleasant. Less pleasant than, the least pleasant.
Polite. More polite than, the most polite. Less polite than, the least polite. Polluted. More polluted than, the most polluted. Less polluted than, the least polluted. Powerful. more powerful than, the most powerful, less powerful than, the least powerful, prosperous, more prosperous than, the most prosperous, less prosperous than, the least prosperous, reasonable, more reasonable than, the most reasonable, less reasonable than, the least reasonable.
Regular. More regular than, the most regular. Less regular than, the least regular. Relaxing. More relaxing than, the most relaxing. Less relaxing than, the least relaxing. Reliable. More reliable than, the most reliable. Less reliable than, the least reliable. Ridiculous. More ridiculous than, the most ridiculous. Less ridiculous than, the least ridiculous. Sensible. More sensible than, the most sensible. Less sensible than, the least sensible.
Serious. More serious than, the most serious. Less serious than, the least serious. Slippery. More slippery than, the most slippery. Less slippery than, the least slippery. Sociable. More sociable than, the most sociable. Less sociable than, the least sociable. Sophisticated. More sophisticated than, the most sophisticated. Less sophisticated than, the least sophisticated. Stupid. More stupid than, the most stupid. Less stupid than, the least stupid.
Successful. More successful than, the most successful. Less successful than, the least successful. Surprising. More surprising than, the most surprising. Less surprising than, the least surprising. Talkative. More talkative than, the most talkative. Less talkative than, the least talkative. Terrible. More terrible than, the most terrible. Less terrible than, the least terrible. Terrific. More terrific than, the most terrific. Less terrific than, the least terrific.
Thoughtful. More thoughtful than, the most thoughtful. Less thoughtful than, the least thoughtful. Useful. More useful than, the most useful. Less useful than, the least useful. Usual. More usual than, the most usual. Less usual than, the least usual. Valuable. More valuable than, the most valuable. Less valuable than, the least valuable. Wonderful. More wonderful than, the most wonderful. Less wonderful than, the least wonderful.
Recuerda, suscríbete totalmente gratis a este canal. Comenta y comparte. Regálame un like o un me gusta si esta clase fue de tu agrado. Activa la campanita de notificaciones para que recibas las alertas cada vez que subamos un nuevo video. Por favor, apoya nuestro canal con tus donaciones en la cuenta de PayPal. Aquí abajo te dejo el enlace. Mi nombre es Raúl Joven León. Mi correo electrónico personal es rjoven66@gmail.com. Muchas gracias. Bueno amigos, hemos llegado al final de nuestra clase número 239, los superlativos, video número 5. Muchas gracias por el privilegio de tu tiempo y espero verte en un próximo video. Hasta la vista amigos.